Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, now this is the hadith Qudsi, yeah? Allah says that my slave does not come close to me with anything more beloved to me than the fara'id. Okay, I'm gonna just stop there for a second. Hadith continues, but I'm gonna pause there for a second. Allah is saying here that the abd, the slave of Allah, does not come close to Allah with anything else that Allah loves more than first and foremost the things which Allah has made fard, or obligatory. Now, why is that important? The reason that's important is that one of the most common sort of things that I think human beings, one of the most common traps, if you will, that human beings fall into even when they're on the path to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. So I'm talking about a believer, I'm talking about someone who's really trying to excel spiritually. I think one of the most common pitfalls is that they overlook, sometimes in our zeal, you know what I mean? Sometimes we're very zealous, I want to do all these extra things because I want to be really like close to Allah, right? And that may come from a great intention. I want to be really close to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, so I want to do all these extra fancy things, but they overlook the fara'id. But they may overlook the fara'id. Okay, let me give you an example. So suppose someone is very, very, passionate about the deen, and in their passion for the deen, they put in a lot of time working in Islamic work, put in a lot of time working for the masjid, maybe put in a lot of time working for a charity, a lot of time, volunteering, maybe it's MSA, whatever it is. Now, because they're putting in so much work into this beautiful cause, working for the masjid, working for MSA, working for this Islamic organization, maybe they're, staying up all night working, maybe into the wee hours of the night or the morning, really, and they're not getting to sleep until 3. And guess what's happening to Fajr? What's happening? Well, they're sleeping right through Fajr, right? So what's happened here? What's happened here is that there is this focus on, I want to do this volunteer work, and, I'm working for this organization, and it's like, I'm giving everything to it. But then what happens is I end up sleeping through Fajr. Now let's examine that. Fajr is a fard. Fajr on time is a fard. It is an obligation. It is, if you don't do it, you are extremely sinful. It is a sin, and it's actually a very serious sin. It's a very massive sin to miss the time of Fajr. So in order to do something that is a nafil, something that is praiseworthy, but it is not a fard, such as the volunteerism in this example, but you are ending up missing or overstepping, abandoning a fard, something that is obligatory, something that is going to be actually a sin upon you if you don't do it. Another example of something that is fard is kindness to parents, right? Sometimes people might be so zealous, about a certain cause or a certain, whatever it happens to be, that is, again, a nafil, it's something extra, it's something sunnah. But in order to do that, they kind of trample upon their parents, or they're very rude with their parents. Maybe something realistic. Maybe your parents don't want you to be involved in too much volunteer work because they're worried about your studies. Very realistic for those who've been in college, involved with ISOCs or MSAs, Muslim Students Associations. Sometimes the parents are worried about the grades, and they're like, I don't want you to go to this meeting. I don't want you to get distracted from your studies. Okay, well, that's a legitimate concern. It's your parents. And, you might be like, but you know what I mean? Like, so zealous that you're like, forget you, to your parents, and be like, no, I'm gonna go anyway, and like literally your parent says, don't go to the meeting, and you still go to the meeting. This is just a very simple example, but that is disregarding that's disobeying your parents. in something that you don't have to do, right? And they do have a right. I mean, if they're telling you, and we know this from the Quran, if they're telling you to do something which is not their right to tell you, then you respectfully disobey. You respectfully disobey. You know, if they're telling you obviously not to pray, not to wear hijab, take off your hijab, you know, you're not going to get married unless people can see your hair, these types of things, right? Which are also realistic. In that case, you don't listen. You don't, you know, you respectfully, again, by the way, the ihsan is still required. The kindness is still required, even if they're telling you to leave Islam. You know, the commandment of ihsan towards your parents doesn't get negated, even if they are calling you to kufr or to shirk. So imagine if they're calling you to something that is within their right to call you to, you know, and so that is not the proper procedure to gaining the love of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. The proper procedure as prescribed by this hadith is first the fara'id, the things which are obligatory. Solidify those things. Make sure that those things are in order and that they are your foundation. And then the hadith goes on to say, and then they continue to get closer to Allah through the nawafil, or the supererogatory extra good deeds, the sunan, the things which are not obligatory but are extra good deeds. That's how the second step, they're building upon the foundation, which is the fard or the obligatory, and then they're doing the nawafil, which are the extra things, the things that are sunan, okay? And then, so this is the building, right? This is the procedure. And then the hadith says, until I love him or her. This is Allah saying, right? And then Allah says that this procedure is what gets the love of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. Until I love him or her. And when I love him or her, I become his or her hearing with which he hears, his or her sight with which they see, the hand with which they strike, and the foot with which they walk. And if they were to ask me of something, I would surely give it to them. If they would seek my help, I would help them. If they seek my forgiveness, I forgive them. So here we see this beautiful, prescription of how to attain the love of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. And it begins by the foundation of the fara'id, of the obligatory, and then you build upon it with the extra things, the nawafil. Make sure you don't switch those. You can't make a building without the foundation first, without the foundation being strong. That building will collapse. And so if your foundation is not strong in the fard, in the obligatory matters, you can build all the nawafil, all the extra things you want. You can be able to out hadith anyone, you can argue better with your hadiths, and you're knowing of fiqh, and you're this and you're that. But if you don't have the foundation, if you don't have that foundation in the fara'id, then that building will not be sustainable and it will collapse. And that's not how we attain the love of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. The last part of that hadith, when it talks about being the hearing with which they hear, the sight with which they see, the hand with which they strike, the foot with which they walk, what this is saying is that the actions of that individual become a reflection of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. That individual, their actions, whether they're hearing, they're seeing, they're what they do with their hands, where they go with their feet, they're striving, will be a reflection of the light of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala and the love of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala.